Hello, it's the Elite Gur here, and today I'm here to talk about what seems to be a new trend. Open world, player-driven space MMOs. Of course, all of these games come in the wake of EVE Online, the monolithic enterprise which I've been playing for some months now. The implied tagline of many of these games is that they have all the scale and grandeur of EVE without all the tired RPG combat systems and overly opaque mechanics. And don't get me wrong, if something of the sort actually works, it will be amazing. But I am extremely disturbed by what I'm seeing here. Not only are these games being chucked into an MMO market meat grinder, just like all those games strung up around World of Warcraft, but there also seems to be a basic misunderstanding of how EVE works on a design level, and some overly wishful thinking about the technical aspects. Worst of all, millions of dollars in Kickstarter funding and pre-orders are going towards some of these games before they're even reaching an alpha stage. So I'm here to try to give my fair warning and temper some enthusiasm. Personally, I think EVE Online is an amazing game, but the common and very well justified complaint about it is that the combat is boring, and people want to be able to fly their ship around freely. I personally think that the other mechanical and meta-mechanical aspects of the EVE universe compensate for that, but I definitely understand why this is the sticking point. So of course, the offer is battles that look like this, but gameplay that's more like this. And that's very appealing, even to an EVE player like myself. But the question is, why didn't CCP make a game like that in the meantime? Capitalism solves all problems. EVE Online's only fault is its low-level gameplay being dull as dishwater, and a dogfighting game can engage even the twitchiest gamer. Such a game would sell like 100 Iskplex and Jita. The reason for EVE's RPG gameplay, both technical and architectural, I will explain here. In all things, context is important, and multiplayer games are no different. In EVE, that context is that the ship you're flying, all the enemy ships being flown against you by other players, have a long history. Resources were mined, explorers and PvEers found the blueprints and extra shiny bits, some industrial types went through the steps of building the ships and hauling them to market, and all those steps were made by players. Those steps, and where they took place and under whose auspices, then likely influenced when and why your current battle took place against these living people on the other side of the internet. When the focus is switched into dogfighting, I feel the space for those other very important parts of the gigantic machine which is the MMO of this kind are lost, and you risk losing the context. The point of EVE really isn't the giant battles, it's the urgency and permanence that the other elements lend to it. It'd be a totally uninteresting game if it was just a set of battle arenas into which thousands of players piled in to cycle their guns at each other. Look at a picture of a space battle from a movie, like so. Because you have all these characters trained in military precision flying with communication, they're in some sort of sensical formation. When you look at an EVE battle, while it may look chaotic, when tags are added to denote the sides, the battle lines and formations are pretty clear. But when you have a full online game with players of differing skill levels, some unaffiliated, battles will devolve into complete incomprehensible messes of characters flying around each other trying to dogfight. And when they all have line of sight on each other, there's not going to be much sense for any one player. And even some EVE battles are like being thrown into a tumble dryer with beads. So this means that battles must be much smaller in a game with full dogfighting and take place in set arenas with some sort of landmark. If that's the case, I feel that the appeal of being in an uncontrived open world is somewhat compromised. There might be a way around it, but it doesn't seem clear. EVE had a very rocky launch, no one's going to deny that, but since then, CCP has tried to be on the cutting edge of server design and netcode, and when things go smoothly, those giant battles can go down in one corner of the universe with nary a hitch, while the real wheels of war still turn in the trade hubs. But things, when they're still very sudden, or very, very large, time dilation, or planned lag, kicks in. And that is acceptable because of the deterministic nature of the RPG combat. But you can't have time dilation in a dogfighting game, and then load from, say, a wing of player-controlled fighter craft with full range of movement and hit-scan-determined weapons is massive by comparison. When playing a dogfighting game, you need to have fast response times, little lag, etc. And if EVE can't accomplish that with very slow gameplay, years of iteration, and military-grade hardware, I have my doubts as to whether it's possible. Even if it is, the amount of server power that will be required to make these 1,000-man fleet battles work will be so great that paying for them will be difficult. So then subscription fees or maybe even really cutthroat F2P systems can be expected. If you're really going to invest players in the world that you've created with your game, you really need to allow them to have big, expansive space empires with depletable permadeath resources. And then the game needs to be fair. Everything from the loading times to server transitions to ping needs to be rock solid, or else people are going to lose out and feel like they were cheated. In a real-time dogfighting game where split seconds count, pings will need to be consistent between players the world over. How are you going to manage that in an MMO with a single persistent server? Balancing EVE Online, a game with nigh infinite variables and veritable empires of real people banking on the decisions made, is no small task. Balancing a competitive FPS game, towing the line between the difference in player skill and style, isn't either. Doing the second on the scale of the first? I think it's impossible. And then, as said before, people will feel cheated. All of these questions need answering, and while I believe there are many ways they could be answered, there is an amount of faith and, more importantly, money being lavished on these games before there's even an alpha build in existence. I do very much wish that they succeed, and that the goodwill wasn't misplaced. This is the Elite Gur, and I'll be pew-pewing you in the space lanes. Have a good one.